The clips gave you the impact. They did not give you the betrayal inside the sequence. Because while Prince Sultan was getting hit, Washington was still talking like the war was under control. At the very moment this war was entering a nastier phase, Trump was still saying talks were going very well. That line is not background noise anymore. It is the sentence that makes the next images feel almost obscene, because the battlefield was already starting to say something very different. Then comes the image that detonates the title, a wrecked E-3 Sentry at Prince Sultan, its tail broken off, its radar dome on the ground. That is not a damaged backdrop to the war. That is the war's nervous system lying open in public. And this was not even the first time damage at Prince Sultan had been talked down. Trump had already brushed off earlier aircraft hits at the same base as virtually no damage. Which means this story is not just about one strike. It is about a pattern of confidence colliding with evidence until the confidence starts sounding smaller than the wreckage. If you're here for the layer beneath the talking points, subscribe now. And before the spin fully hardens, tell me in the comments what this really was. A warning shot? Or the moment Washington lost the right to talk like it still controls the sky? So here's the question that should lock the rest of this video in place. If Iran can reach into Saudi Arabia and hit the systems that help America see, fuel, and manage the war, then what exactly is Trump still claiming to control? The answer starts with one brutal fact. Prince Sultan was not important because it sat on a map. It was important because it carried the hidden machinery of American air power, the part most viewers never think about, until one strike makes it impossible not to. Several U.S. refueling aircraft were damaged in the strike on Prince Sultan Air Base. That changes the meaning of the attack immediately, because tankers are not decorative assets, sitting off to the side. They're what keep range alive, tempo alive, and the entire air campaign moving beyond the first wave. A fighter can look powerful on camera. A tanker almost never does. But the moment tankers start taking hits, power stops looking clean. It starts looking dependent. And dependency is where audiences stop hearing dominance and start hearing vulnerability. Prince Sultan is operated by the Royal Saudi Air Force, but it is also used by the U.S. Air Force's 378th Air Expeditionary Wing. That means this was never just some distant Allied runway that happened to be nearby. It was part of the support architecture carrying U.S. operations, which is exactly why a hit there lands harder than a normal headline suggests. That is also where the Saudi layout gets ugly. Publicly, Riyadh has every reason to sound cautious, controlled, and slightly removed. But when a U.S.-used base on Saudi soil starts absorbing repeat Iranian pressure, the gap between public posture and military reality becomes very hard to hide. And once that gap opens, the Trump angle stops being cosmetic. Trump goes quiet is not really about whether he physically says 0 words. It is about the moment his words stop owning the meaning of events. The strike starts talking louder than the man. Later reporting put the casualty count at least 15 wounded U.S. service members in the strike on the Saudi airbase. That matters because it kills any temptation to file this away as a mostly technical embarrassment. This attack left a human imprint, as well as an operational one. That human side is part of why this feels worse than the official tone around it. American personnel were not hit while charging towards some obvious frontline spectacle. They were hit inside the protective machinery of the war, in the kind of place that is supposed to feel one layer removed from direct exposure. And that is where the image of the E-3 starts to matter far beyond aesthetics. Once that aircraft enters the story, the title's phrase "U.S. eyes exposed" is no longer rhetorical. It starts to sound painfully literal. If the damage to that E-3 is confirmed at the level already reported, the aircraft is likely unrepairable. That is a devastating sentence, because an AWS is not just another expensive platform on a runway. It is a flying command post, a surveillance hub, and a battle management brain that helps make a scattered force act like one force. That is a symbolic detail this whole script turns around. Not smoke, not sirens, not one more generic missile clip. The radar dome on the ground. The eye of the aircraft separated from the aircraft itself. The system that helps others see, suddenly reduced to something that could not protect itself. The loss of the AWACS would be a serious blow to U.S. surveillance capabilities. That means less clean visibility, less elegant control, and less certainty that every aircraft and every threat in the sky is being sorted and managed with the same confidence Washington would like the world to assume. That does not mean America suddenly becomes helpless. It means the machine becomes rougher. It means the air war keeps going, but with more friction, more strain, and more pressure on every remaining node that still has to carry the weight. And once the viewer understands that, the whole title clicks into place. Prince Sultan did not just get hit. A support hub was penetrated. A surveillance asset was mangled. A political narrative built on control started sounding thin. That is the real payoff. The immediate operational meaning of that loss is coverage gaps. And coverage gaps are where power begins to lose its glamour. They are the moments when the force is still huge, still deadly, still moving, but no longer seeing and coordinating with the same smoothness that makes dominance look effortless. This is why Iran does not need to beat the United States outright to make this hurt. It only needs to make the stronger side feel less seamless than it sounds. That is how asymmetric pressure works when it is aimed at the right targets. The strike on Prince Sultan fits that logic almost too well. Go after the assets that extend range. Go after the assets that organize the sky. Go after the hubs that hold too much of the backstage infrastructure in one place. Do not win the whole war. Disturb the machinery that makes the other side look in control of it. One account of the strike says it damaged multiple KC-135 tankers and an E-3 Sentry AWAs at the same base. That pairing matters more than any one explosive image. It suggests that the target set was not random destruction. It was a support layer that lets us air power stay long, see far, and act fast. And that is where the official narratives begin fighting each other in public. Iran wants the world to believe it can still reach high-value U.S. assets deep in the Gulf. Washington wants the world to believe the war remains controlled, limited, and steadily bending toward its own objectives. The independent evidence does not give either side everything it wants, but it absolutely does say this: the sanctuary story is weakened now. That is also why the earlier clips alone were never enough. The clips tell you the strike happened. They tell you bodies were heard. They tell you the story is live. But they do not fully tell you that this may have been a strike on the hidden scaffolding of American power, which is the only version of the story strong enough to deserve the title. One account put the attack package at 6 ballistic missiles and 29 drones fired at Prince Sultan. That is not a theatrical pinprick. That is a pressure designed to saturate, stress defenses, and force choices inside a base that was already too important to be casual about. Saturation is how a place stops feeling safe without even needing total destruction. The defenders have to read more, sort more, intercept more, guess more. Every extra incoming track is a tax on confidence. Every extra decision is another chance for the enemy to get through to something that matters. And the thing that mattered most at Prince Sultan was never just its name. It was what the base represented. A supposed rear area, a deep support node, a place where the United States could assemble the enablers of war with enough distance to feel protected. That idea is what took the real hit. At the same time, the Houthi entry into the conflict marked a potentially significant escalation that widens the meaning of Prince Sultan immediately. The question is no longer just whether one Saudi base was penetrated. It is whether the entire war is spreading into a broader campaign against the network of positions and systems that sustain U.S. pressure across the region. That widening is what keeps the story from flattening. First, the viewer thinks this is about a base. Then they realize it may be about the eyes of the war. Then they realize the conflict itself is expanding, while those eyes are under pressure. Every layer raises the stakes instead of rephrasing the same point, and this is exactly where the political language starts looking trapped. You can keep saying the war is on schedule. You can keep saying your objectives are intact. You can keep saying you have options. But once the infrastructure behind those options starts taking visible damage, the language feels less like command and more like insulation. At the same time, the public was being told the war could remain controlled. The Pentagon confirmed that elements of the 82nd Airborne Division headquarters and a brigade combat team were slated to deploy to the Middle East. That is what strategic stress looks like in the real world. Public messaging talks restraint and momentum, while force posture keeps thickening underneath it. The more that posture thickens, the harder it becomes to sell the idea that Prince Sultan was just an ugly but manageable footnote. Reinforcements do not prove panic on their own, but they do prove that the people running the war see enough instability to keep adding muscle even while the public story keeps smoothing the edges. This is the point where viewers usually start sharing a video like this. Not because they enjoy military jargon, but because they recognize the pattern. First, the official tone gets too confident. Then the battlefield produces a contradiction. Then the contradiction gets buried under vaguer language while the map itself quietly says, the problem is growing, U.S. Central Command had not issued an official statement confirming the full extent of the damage or casualties. That silence does not automatically prove the worst case. But in war, the facts that stay blurry the longest are usually the ones pressing hardest against the story people in power would rather tell first. So yes, there was an information war layered over the strike itself. Iran has every reason to maximize the damage and declare that it hit the American eye in the sky. Washington has every reason to narrow the language, slow the confirmation, and prevent one Saudi base from becoming a symbol of something larger. But symbols do not wait for perfect paperwork. They form the second the public sees what the system tried to keep invisible. And that is why the title survives even if the most dramatic claims get revised later. If the E3 was fully destroyed, then this was one of the most psychologically violent hits of the war because it struck a platform that helps the United States see and control the battle space itself. If the E3 was not fully destroyed but only catastrophically damaged, the deeper conclusion still survives untouched. Iran reached into Saudi Arabia, hit a US-used hub, wounded American personnel, damaged critical enablers, and punctured the idea of a safe rear. That is the dual truth at the heart of this story. One version is worse. The other is still bad enough. Either way, the outcome is the same for the viewer watching this carefully. Prince Sultan exposed dependence. And dependence is what makes empires suddenly look human. So when the title says Trump goes quiet, the real meaning is this. The strike took the microphone away from the rhetoric. It forced the war to speak in a different language. Broken aircraft, wounded personnel, heavier deployments, wider escalation, and a surveillance layer that no longer feels untouchable. That is why this cannot be reduced to Iran struck a base and left there. That is the safest possible version of the story, and it is the least honest one. The more truthful version is harsher. A base carrying American support architecture was hit. The machinery of U.S. air power was shown to be targetable, and the political story of control lost some of its authority. That, the moment the wreckage surfaced, and once that happens, every future reassurance becomes more expensive. Every future claim of dominance has to push against the memory of that radar dome on the ground. Every future promise of control has to answer the same question to this strike, already raised. If the eyes of the war can be touched, what else can be touched next? That is the final conclusion, and it is bigger than the headline. Prince Sultan did not just take a hit, it exposed the hidden system behind the hit. And once that system is visible, the war stops looking clean, contained, and confidently managed. Stay close. This channel follows the moment the official story loses control of the truth.